Everything I've been making recently is so boring. And the weirdest part, the paintings were turning out exactly how I'd imagined. Technically correct and precisely painted, but completely lifeless. That is when I stumbled across this painting. And it hit me. I have been so focused on the how of painting that I completely forgot about the why. So today I'm not going to be sharing with you some cool new technique that I've learned, but instead I want to share with you the stories which have inspired me. Stories about tragedy and romance and mystery. So what better artist to look into than John William Waterhouse? I've always admired his work for being able to share stories with the viewer without using any words at all. So I'm doing a study of one of my favourite paintings of his, which is Hylas and the Nymphs. It's based on a haunting story from ancient Greek mythology, and it's not one of those big epic battles that everyone knows. It's actually a much quieter tale about seeing something that you were never meant to see. The story is based around a young lad named Hylas, and he was sailing with the legendary Hercules. Not just sailing with him, but actually Hercules had become rather fond of the boy. They were both part of a crew on the ship called the Argo. One summer evening, they stopped at a mysterious shoreline. Hylas wanted to help out, so he grabbed his bronze pitcher and headed into the misty forest to grab some fresh water. After some time searching the forest, he finally found what he'd been looking for, a perfect little freshwater pool. But as he knelt to fill his pitcher, a hand reached out of the water and grabbed him. 7 nymphs rose out of the water. Their beauty was otherworldly, and they seemed sweet and unassuming. Their skin had a moonlit glow, and their hair moved like shadows in the water. For poor Hylas, it was already too late. He was already mesmerised by their beauty that no mortal man should have seen. They dragged him into the depths, and with no splash and no sound, he vanished, and he was never seen again. It's such a compelling story, and you can see why Waterhouse and many other artists in history have decided to paint this myth. It was truly hard to capture the essence of this painting, especially since I had to make it much smaller than the original and basically crop out most of the painting. But the whole point in doing this was not to have the best painting that I've ever made at the end of it. Instead, it was to try and discover what it is that makes Waterhouse's painting so good at storytelling. Now, you don't even need to know the story to kind of understand what is going on in this painting. The way the figures in the painting are interacting with each other is all the storytelling we need. And that is such a skill. Like, so often I make these paintings with these very posed positions, which there is nothing wrong with, but also to be able to tell a story like this, you have to show that natural interaction, which I just really admire about Waterhouse. Since I picked up oil painting, I feel like I've had so much to learn that I have been focusing almost entirely on just the technical side of art, which is obviously really useful, but also not the only thing that goes into making an unforgettable painting. In my quest to try and polish up my technique, I have completely abandoned the creative side of painting, and the two sides are so difficult to manage. They both require thought and practice, so trying to find this mid-ground of trying to practice the techniques but also be creative and tell stories with your paintings, it's so hard. But luckily, today's sponsor makes it possible for you to learn all the skills that you require in one place. I have been using Skillshare to not only learn about storytelling in paintings, but also how to use storytelling in my videos to make it all more interesting for you guys. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry experts across so many different categories like illustration, design, painting, freelance productivity, and so many more. And besides having just taken the storytelling class, I have also absolutely devoured the class about how to use my Sony camera, because it kind of dawned on me that I make a lot of videos and have very little knowledge on actually what I'm doing. So if you're looking for a place to scrub up your skills on pretty much any area you can think of, then Skillshare is the place. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare, so get started today. Anyway, back to the video. I'm sure you are wondering, what is it that I chose to paint for my second painting? Well, in keeping with the idea of taking stories from myths and folklore, we actually are moving from Greece to Ireland now. This is a tale that I remember hearing about when I was much younger, and ever since I've just been captivated by it. The story centres around Cleona. She's the queen of banshees and goddess of love and beauty. Cleona decided to leave her divine island because she fell in love with a mortal, Cídon. However, this decision was not looked upon kindly by the king of the sea, Manannán mac Lir, which is quite the mouthful, try and say that 5 times. So one night while she was sat by the ocean, the king conjured a melody to lure her into the waters. Whether or not Cleona drowned, we don't know. It differs from telling to telling of the story. But to this day, it's still said that you can hear Cleona's wails washing over the sea. I love how the story leaves you with an eerie sense of the unknown, and I knew I had to capture that in the painting, so making this moody, black sky was always in the vision. But part of what I realised doing this painting is that trying to adapt a story into a piece of art, you can take some liberties to make it look better. So many of the retellings that I've heard, she was sleeping on the beach and then a wave swept her away, but I knew I wanted to make it look like she was just in this trance from this melody, and you can take some liberties with that. So I ended up doing it so that she is almost looking back at him, but not quite at him, almost like this distant gaze, like she's not quite fully there, with this stray tear down her cheek. And in the story, Cídon is not even meant to be here yet, but I wanted to show that connection between two people. It's far easier to tell a story when there's two people connecting with each other rather than a lone figure. I feel like it just does tell the story a bit better. I really had to push myself to make this work. I'm not usually an artist that tends to do any landscapes, so I didn't really know what I was doing, but I just winged it with these waves, and I actually love how it ended up turning out. The thing with doing these storytelling pieces is that you need very specific references to kind of convey the feeling, so I managed to rope in my boyfriend to help me take pictures, and that was a laugh in itself. The one problem was we didn't have anyone to take our pictures together, so we ended up having to take each other's pictures, and then I stitched it all together in some Frankenstein image in Procreate. This is the problem with trying to create a full scene like this. There's a lot more that goes into it than just working from quite close reference. Since the references were took in my living room, I knew I was going to need to change the lighting, the colours, the mood, the background, which in of itself is just getting your brain thinking a bit more. It requires more creativity, which is something that I know I've been lacking. But here's where things start to go a little bit wrong. So I could not decide on this pose for Cídon, trying to convey the desperation he must have felt in the story, whilst also making the painting look aesthetically pleasing and also making sense in terms of anatomy was so difficult. In the end, I decided to go for him on his knees, almost pleading with her to stay. I feel like it worked well with the composition, and I liked the way it looked. Unfortunately, I was under huge time constraints for this painting, and I ended up really rushing this end bit, which feels like a shame. I didn't really manage to fully finish it. It feels like it was an idea not fully fleshed out, but still, despite it not being one of my best paintings technically, I definitely think it conveys a story, so I decided to call this piece Cleona's Wail.
It took time to recognize we are all filled with pride.